Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Welcome to the Visibility Project podcast.
Started by a group of citizens in a small Michigan town with a like-minded goal
of increasing the visibility
of the unseen and unheard populations in our community.
Our guests will share stories and insights
with the goal of increasing our awareness and knowledge
of various aspects of diversity and equity
to create a more connected, empathetic, and inclusive community.
So, let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
So let's get to work.
So, let's get to work.
Let's get to work.
Welcome back to the Visibility Project podcast. I'm a proud member of the Visibility Project team and the guest host for this episode, Angela Johnson. Spearheaded by the members of the Cultural Awareness Coalition, the project is the brainchild of several organizations and individuals with shared values who sit on a project steering team. We hope that the podcast series creates a deeper empathy for others and serves as a catalyst for people to actively create a more inclusive community and world. Jeremiah Lee, the regular host of the Visibility Project, is an incredible human being who's so dedicated to this mission that he gave up the host seat to share a story on this month's episode. For this topic, we're teaming up with the Directions Not Included podcast to create a two-part series that will help to break down stigma around substance use disorder. Directions Not Included is a local podcast that focuses on positive youth development, substance use disorder prevention, and community support. In addition to Jeremiah, you'll hear from Julie Stroyer from Peer 360 Recovery Alliance and Lori Zolkowski from Families Against Narcotics. Each of these individuals has a powerful story to share with us that cannot be condensed into an introduction. For the first time, we'll have our guests introduce themselves and give them a space to share their story. So Jeremiah, I'm sure this is a very surreal experience for you, sitting across the table from us. How are you feeling?
Doing okay. I kind of like this. I'm going to be answering the questions instead of asking them for a change.
Is it less pressure, more pressure?
I feel like it's a little more pressure because usually I come prepared with the questions and I have a structure. This time I'm just going by the seat of my pants. But that's all right.
Yeah. I just want to thank you because when we started talking about this episode with our work group, you didn't have to share this part of your life with us. I don't think many of us knew your experience with substance use. And so I just want to commend you for volunteering to do this. So whenever you feel comfortable, please go ahead and introduce yourself and share your story.
Sure. Yeah. This is, like you said, this is not a story I typically tell. So this is kind of stepping outside of my comfort zone because people really close to me know this story, of course, but even family members and other people don't really know a lot about this. It's something that I'm not really, it's not a part of my history I'm proud of. So, but I consider myself quite successful professionally and personally, and I've been able to in spite of these struggles. So I think that it's really important for me to share these stories because it's possible to overcome these. And I want people to understand that and to normalize it and to have these conversations. So it's a little scary for me, not going to lie, but I'm excited to share it. You know, going into my background, usually I'm the host of the podcast and I'm asking the questions because I'm really passionate about diversity and inclusion. My background really is in international education. And so I just actually put in my 2 weeks notice. I actually just finished working at Northwood University. I was working there for about 8 years where I was overseeing all aspects of international student support. I taught a long time in Japan. I've traveled a ton. I hit about 30 countries. So that's really my bread and butter. And then the other hat I wore was with diversity and inclusion efforts. So I was spearheading all diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at Northwood. And that kind of spilled over into the community too, because there's you can be fine and inclusive and welcoming and within your organization. If you're not doing so also in the community at large, then you're really not really embracing it fully. So that's kind of how this Visibility Project came about too, is just that story.
That's how I met you, was through the community initiatives. Yeah.
Community initiatives. So I started a new job on Monday that I'm still trying to figure out what exactly I do, but I'm really loving it. It's with the company Educo Accelerate. It's based in Australia, but it's really an international education company helping with international student recruitment. But today I wanted to take a step back from being the host of this and kind of share my story. And it's, like I said, it's not something I've really done in the past. My story is going to be, and I will dig deeper into it more, but it's really about when I lived in Japan, I was, had trouble sleeping. I've always had trouble sleeping, still have trouble sleeping with insomnia. It's always just even as a kid. So I got prescribed Ambien to sleep when I was in Japan. And it took it for years and years and years as prescribed. It worked fantastic for me. But over time, my tolerance level, grew and I had to take more to sleep. And it just, it all stemmed from the sleep issues. And then it just kept escalating and snowballing, and it just became, and then just the meds weren't enough. And then I had to drink some beers and to make them effective, and just snowballed into this point where I didn't even recognize myself. Right. And I was very, very lucky to have a great family, and, even my job, they were supportive, and they knew something wasn't right. They're like, that it wasn't myself. And I consider myself really on the ball about my job and my support for others. Cause that's what I love to do, is support other people. And I couldn't even support myself at the time. So
did you tell your job what was going on, or did they just knew something was off?
They knew something was going on. They didn't know exactly. And eventually though, I did go into inpatient rehab to get over. And that's when it was and there was some sparks for that, which I can dive in deeper into, but it was just, my family was worried. My job was worried. My girlfriend was worried. I'm very lucky I was lucky. I know so many people who don't have those support systems, and I was lucky to keep my job throughout it. And, so I want to make sure that I'm telling the story and making sure that people understand that recovery is possible, and it's hard. I still struggle with it every day. Not going to lie. I still a lot of stigmas too is still bother me. It's something I have to talk through and be very open about, but the recovery has given me so much, and it's made me back to who I am. And it's actually made me a stronger version of myself. So I want to make sure that I'm able to share that story and let other people know, recovery is possible, and it's going to make you a better version of yourself too. And being successful and happy and healthy. And that's what it's all about, is being happy and healthy. And that's what I am now, but for a long time I wasn't. And it's a long journey that I struggle again with every day, that I like to share and normalize that it is a struggle, but it's worth it. So yeah, I'll stop there for now, and then we'll dig deeper later. I hope that.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. I know you talked about stigma and how that still impacts you, but I think you being here today, sharing your story, is a step towards that and helping break that down. So
I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty nervous about it, because like I said, I haven't really shared with a lot of people. So it's, a little nervous about it, but I'm excited to be here.
No, thank you. Julie, whenever you feel comfortable, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Julie Stroyer, and I was raised in northern Michigan in a town called Tawas City. I was raised on a farm with both my parents, 7 siblings. Went on to college, got my nursing degree, got married, had 2 children, had a 20-plus year nursing career as a supervisor in a small hospital in Tawas. And at the age of 45, first time ever in my life, found myself addicted, had a substance use disorder, which, like Jeremiah, mine started as well with not sleeping. My mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And because I had a little medical knowledge, every time she got bad news, I had to pass that along to my siblings, to her siblings. Mm-hmm. And, it was hard enough to get the news myself. I hated passing on bad news. Started not being able to sleep. And I mentioned this to some coworkers. One of my coworkers offered me a handful of Norco and said, try these, I'll help you sleep. And they did. And they also helped me, get up in the morning. Then they helped me, to get through the day, so I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to feel anything. So my addiction came on fast, and I was so sick so fast, and it was just overwhelming. But my job, I had my first sign of trouble for me when I realized there was something wrong was with the law. Not unlike many other people, I had stolen some medications from a coworker. The police were at my door, and I ended up having to tell my work what was going on, and but then they forced me to resign.
Okay.
So it was very devastating in a small town. My name was, of course, put in the paper, and it was humiliating. So much shame, guilt. I thought my life was ending. Part of my identity was with my work. A lot of my identity was in my work.
Well, in 20 years.
Yes.
You invested a lot of time in that career.
Yes, I did. And I loved it. I loved my job. And I had never, I had an evaluation 2 months before I resigned that was perfect. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so from there, it was just, like I said, denial, shame, guilt, locked the doors, didn't want to talk to anybody, didn't want to leave the house. And then actually my lawyer asked me, he thought it would be a good idea if I joined the HPRP program in Bay City, the Health Professional Recovery Program. Okay. And I did. And that was going well for about 5 months. And then I got sentenced for my crime, and the prosecuting attorney ordered me to do drug court in Elkona County, which is way north of where I live. And I couldn't do both. I just physically couldn't do Bay County and Elkona County at the same time. So I had to give up HPRP because I was court ordered to do drug court. Anyway, not a lot of detail. The next couple of years were filled with 2 stays in jail, 2 stays at rehab, 2 sober living houses. My mother passed away, and I had a suicide attempt. And so I went through this period of what others probably saw as failures. And it felt like that to me as well. But inside me, nobody could see what my thought process was doing.
Right.
And so I was learning. Even though I was failing, I got kicked out of drug court. I learned something from every one of those incidents. Even being in jail, I learned. And finally, the guilt and the shame lessened, because the more I learn about substance use disorder, the more I realize, this really is a disease and I don't need to be ashamed.
Right.
So that's when I was able to kind of start recovery for me. That's when it really started, when I decided that I was done and I had to change my way of life. So.
And now you work for Pure 360 Recovery Alliance.
I do. So I've been with Pure 360 Recovery Alliance since 2018. I'm the coordinator for Aranac, Midland, and Isabella counties. I never thought in a million years I would ever say that I would find another job that I liked as much as my nursing job, but things happen for a reason, and I have purpose again, and I'm helping people, and it's a wonderful feeling. And I can't say enough about recovery.
Great. You and Jeremiah both say that you're so happier on the other side of it. And so I can't wait for us to talk a little bit more of that journey, because I know it was not an easy journey for either of you. And so, Lori, I want to turn it to you. Your experience is a little bit different than theirs. So again, whenever you feel comfortable, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Lori Zolkowski, and I wear a couple of hats. I am a Delta College faculty member. I teach business classes, which has nothing to do with my advocacy today, although it does play a role because I can be an advocate on campus as well. I am the co-founder of Families Against Narcotics, the Great Lakes Bay Region chapter that we started in November of 2017. So we're coming up on our 4-year birthday. And I did that along with Judge Harry Gill, who's the drug treatment court judge in Bay County. We had both seen some devastating effects with the opioid epidemic, specifically in Bay County. And we both reached out to FAN at the same time, and they connected us, and the rest is history. My most important accomplishment is I am a mom. I'm a mom of our daughter, Amanda, who's 26 years old. She is now 5.5 years in recovery from a 4.5-year IV heroin battle. And so I am a mom of a person who struggles with substance use disorder. And as I sit and listen to Jeremy's story and Julie's story, and thank you so much for sharing your hearts and the toughest part of your life, everything that you experience as the person who was sick with the disease, family members experience the same thing. And I didn't realize that. I thought my daughter was the one with the problem, and I didn't know that we too were becoming sick. The way that we found out that Amanda was a heroin addict is she had just completed her first year at Delta College. So she graduated when she was 17. She was honor roll student, A student, took AP classes, was a volleyball star, never gave us a lick of trouble. My husband, Kevin, and I will be happily married for 32 years on August the 3rd.
Congratulations.
So I don't know how, because I'm 29, so you do the math. I'm not good at that. We never anticipated this. And the way I found out she was a heroin addict is I got a phone call from my mom on a Saturday in May. And I remember I was driving down Mackinac Road. It was a beautiful spring day, and she was screaming that we can't wake Amanda up. We can't wake Amanda up. Papa's in there. There's a needle on the bed, and the ambulance is coming. Gosh. And my brain could not comprehend what that meant. So Papa is a diabetic, and I thought, well, Papa must have used his insulin, and maybe she had an asthma attack. I didn't know what was happening. And so I must have called my husband. I don't remember calling him, but we both pulled into the driveway about the same time, and Amanda was already in the ambulance, and we followed the ambulance back over to McLaren. And that's where she was born. And I remember, if you're familiar with Bay City, there's lots of bridges. I remember going over Vets Bridge thinking, gosh, that's where she was born. Do I go there today now? And they tell me she died. I just didn't know what was happening. We were so blindsided. Not to say that looking back, we didn't notice something was wrong, because we did. So about summer of her junior year, she got a new boyfriend who was 4 years older than she was, and as parents of a daughter, you're never a fan of that.
Right.
But we knew it would be a summer romance and it would be short-lived, and it was. But she switched friend groups. And not that her friends weren't doing anything. They were doing, which I would say is typical American activities, drinking after the football games. Is it illegal? Yes. But it is such an ingrained part of our culture. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows if you're going to get booze, you get it from your garage refrigerator or you steal it from the liquor cabinet. And you take the vodka because you can fill it up with water. Like everybody knows that, right? And now as a college professor, my college students will tell me that they see marijuana as a much better alternative to alcohol for partying. Some of the reasons they give are you don't see two people high fighting, which is the police will tell you is true. And also you can drive high.
Well,
which is fairly concerning that is a belief, and that it's a harmless herb. That is very concerning.
A lot of misconceptions on that.
A lot of misconceptions on that, and especially with a young brain. So she started with low-level use. So very much like Jeremiah, I call that the zero entry pool. Kids might start with vaping. 30% of those kids will transition to traditional tobacco. Now you're smoking a cigarette. Not a huge leap to smoke a joint. Now you're taking an Adderall on Sunday because it's the #1 abused prescription medication on the college campus, and high schoolers know it too. Very effective in helping you stay up on Sunday night to keep your grades up when you've partied all weekend. And then how you feeling on Monday? Not so good. So you grab a Vicodin or a Norco or anything else that was prescribed by the jugful and sits in our cabinets. Easily available, readily available to anybody who wants them. And so our daughter's path was a zero entry pool, much like Jeremiah's. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep for 10 years of my career. I've been a professor for 14, and I was a buyer and store manager for 10 years before that. And one of the products I launched was Tramadol, which is Eltram, which is now one of the problem medications. When I launched it, we were told it was safe and it was not addictive, and I had a garage full of it because it was not scheduled. And so people who are prescribed narcotics by their doctor, or sleeping pills by their doctor, or anti-anxiety pills by their doctor, taken as directed, some people will get addicted to them because that's how narcotics work. So how is an industry, if you say to somebody, hey, is heroin addictive? Oh, yes, it's very addictive. Then we create synthetic opioids and we say they're not addictive. Explain the science of that to me. Explain that to me. That is not possible. People don't get addicted to drugs. Drugs addict people. It's their mechanism of action. It's how they work. It's how they intend to work in the physical brain. And when you expose a young brain like my daughter at 14, 15, 16, their frontal lobe's not developed yet, and it rewires everything. It's just like if we took that laptop and we rewired it, we reprogrammed it when it was still in the programming stage, and now the #1 thing is to seek drugs and to do drugs. My #1 obsessive compulsive behavior was to stop her from seeking and using drugs and trying to save her. And that creates the same type of things, the obsessive compulsive thinking, the lack of sleep, the endless worry, the physical outcomes, the stigma, the shame. I told no one. The only reason my family knew is because she overdosed at my mom's house, which was on $30 that I had given her to go out to eat at Genji with her friends. Pretty thankful that she didn't die from that overdose. But what I've since learned is that would have been false guilt. I did not intentionally give my daughter that money so she could overdose. So I've learned so much in this process on guilt and grief and control and all of those things that people who struggle with the substance, the family struggles the exact same way. It manifests the exact same way. I isolated from my friends. I stopped going out because they would say, oh, how's Amanda? I had 2 choices. Oh, she's great. Lie. Not a fan of that. Or, oh, she's a heroin addict. I couldn't choke those words out. I couldn't say it. Like, I could not say it until I decided as a college professor, there I sit in front of 25 beautiful, smart students, and I was not warning them on what happened in my family to my daughter. Because if it can happen to my kid, it can happen to anybody. And so I decided to start speaking out on campus. Another one of my friends experienced a very tragic loss because of substance use in her family, and we decided to get a small grant, $1,500, which what can you do with $1,500, right? But we were like, we have to do something on campus, and we developed some programming on campus that was written up in our little tiny Delta Collegiate newspaper, and a local reporter reached out and said, would you like to tell your story publicly? Oh, joke. I don't know. Since I've not told my other side of the family, since I've not told my boss, since I've not told anybody, like, is this how we do it? And at that point, I felt like it was a dereliction of duty to not start saying what happened in our family. And so I decided to start speaking out, and that has just snowballed. And now I am a very vocal, proud advocate for families. We created programs surrounding with Hope Not Families Against Narcotics, the Hope Not Handcuffs program, quick response teams. We have peer recovery coaches. We have family recovery coaches. We do things now that didn't exist when I was struggling and I felt so terribly alone and lived in fear, afraid of the drug dealer, afraid of addiction, afraid of my reputation would be lost, lived in constant fear, and I don't anymore. And my daughter is recovering. She works her program every single day, just like Jeremiah. It is a daily diligence for her. She's 5 years, 4 months, actually, maybe tomorrow. I think tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. Not that I keep track or anything, but every day that your loved one is alive, you just cherish that. And we've made some beautiful memories, but she's been to rehab 3 times. She's lived in recovery housing for a year twice. She went to IOP. She took MAT. She did all the acronyms. She moved to Grand Rapids and lived there for 7 years when she was 18 because there were just too many people, places, and things here at home. I'm kind of thankful for COVID because she moved back with us last March, year ago March, and she's been with us ever since. And it is a joy to have her home and have her happy and have her healthy. But she takes her recovery very, very seriously. She will work her program every day, just like a type 2 diabetic. You got to check your blood sugar, take your insulin. You can't really go to bakeries and hang out with people eating donuts. It's not going to end well. And for her, she goes to her meetings. Her recovery family is a second family to her, both in Grand Rapids and now here. And so I am also in recovery as a family member. I've learned not to constantly worry. I've learned how to not feel guilty about things that aren't my fault. I've learned to let her experience the consequences, good and bad, from her behavior. And there is a big learning curve from families who come to us literally with their hair on fire in a panic like I was. And now we have resources that we can help with that.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you all for sharing. I know it can be very intimidating and scary coming in here, being vulnerable and sharing the hardest parts of your life with all of us. So just first and foremost, thank you. And we're going to kind of dig in deeper here about just more about your experiences, and stigma is going to be a big conversation that we have, because it was true in all of your stories about when you accessed treatment or told people and things like that. So that's kind of going to be what we're going to focus on as we continue into here. I really just want you thinking about your own journeys and what happened, and you all kind of touched on it, but when did you realize that you had a substance use disorder, that something was going on? And so, Julie, do you want to, you're smirking. Does something stand out for you?
Actually, yes, there's 2 things. First of all, after I was in my substance use disorder for a while, I told myself I can quit whenever I want, and I can detox myself. I'm a nurse. I can do this. No one's going to know. I'll quit when it's time. The first thing was when the state police showed up in my driveway. Of course, I realized that, this is out of my control. I've never been in trouble before. But the second thing for me, and I've told maybe 2 people this, when my mom was dying and I was stealing her morphine from her, I knew I was sick. I mean, I was so sick. But no matter how much I wanted to do the right thing, I would sit and think about it. I just couldn't not do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, both of those stick out for me.
Absolutely. When you said you stole from your coworker, and I'm assuming she called the police on you. Like, was there anger towards her? Did you try to displace that, or did you have a come to Jesus moment? Like, okay, no, this is it. Something's off.
What happened was I had been to her home. We were friends, I had been to her home. So I would know her work schedule. So I would go take pills while she was at work, while she put a camera up.
Oh, okay.
And so that's how that worked. And so I got a call on the police came, I think it was a Tuesday night, and said, we think this is you and that. And I had to work with this lady the next day. And I called her that night. And of course, just in denied everything, deny. Very, very rough time. Yeah. But she was very understanding.
That's good.
Yes. She was very understanding about it. She knew more about addiction than I did, I believe, because she understood that it was a disease. And it's very sad to say, but when I was in nursing, we had very little training, very little education on addiction or substance use. The physicians have very little training. So I have learned so much from this. I would be a much better nurse today.
Great. Thank you. Jeremiah, what about you? I know you said there was kind of like 2 years where you're using and it
Well,
kind of got
I
out of
used
control.
I used Ambien for a long time, but again, as it's prescribed for years. I think it was like year 3 of my time in Japan, which is probably like 2011. And my last day of taking Ambien was December 17th, 2017. Still remember today because that's the day I went into inpatient. Up until probably about 2015 or so, it was not a problem. Like I don't want to say not. It was. I was taking pretty much as prescribed. It was not like I was dependent upon it, and I knew I was dependent upon it. And I came back from Japan. I was like, I want to try to get off this, and then I still couldn't sleep. For me, it was always in my mind. It was always this issue of sleep. And I've always been a tortured sleeper. Like I said, even as a kid, even now, I take trazodone, which helps me and it works perfectly. I go to sleep. It's not something I ever wanted. Like it's not a non-addictive, but Ambien for me, it was like, okay, this is what works for me. I tried taking trazodone and things, but the problem was it was not that trazodone wouldn't work for me to sleep. It was that the addiction of Ambien was still there. And I was like, okay, whatever. I still have to take it. So for a couple of years here in the States, I kept taking it as prescribed pretty much and just kept getting harder and harder though. And for me, always it was about sleep to me in my mind. So I was like, oh, I need, like, eventually it was like, oh, my tolerance is too high. I can't so then I was like, man, 1 a day is not enough. I can't, I'm needing 2 to sleep at night. How the hell am I going to do this? Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, exchanging with friends who also took it and other things like that. And still it was in my mind, it was under control kind of. I was like, oh, this sucks that I have to keep, this tolerance is bad. I was like, but I never was a thought of okay, how do I stop this? Because I didn't realize there's an addiction at that. Mm-hmm. And eventually then I realized that I could buy from online pharmacies or, phone calls. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, this is an easy solution. I can stop borrowing, stealing from friends and the struggle. I can get it and I can take my 2 at night or whatever it is, or 1.5 at night and I can get to sleep. Cause then it was sleep issues still for me. Mm-hmm. And then it just kept escalating. Cause once I was able to buy, then I'm like, okay, now I'm taking 2. Now my tolerance is not enough for that. 2 wasn't enough to sleep. Then it became 3. Right. And then
slippery slope.
And then it's very slippery. So that's really the catalyst was. And so I remember still thinking it was sleep oriented. So I'm going to sleep studies and trying to get help and but eventually then again, the Ambien wasn't enough to sleep. So I found myself, having to drink more. And I back in college and stuff, and even in Japan and stuff, I partied. I did. And that was a thing we did. And and so I'd go out still with coworkers afterwards and I'd be everything was consumed for me about, I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. I'm not going to be able to sleep. I don't have enough. I'm not going to sleep. And that was what my mind was about, thinking that was the issue. That wasn't the issue, right? And so eventually, what the catalyst for me is that I went out for some drinks with a friend after work in Midland, and my girlfriend was at my folks' place in Saginaw, and she was upset with me because I was out for drinks, which understandably, because that was a thing I was doing now. And so I went home. I was upset. So I took some Ambien to go to sleep. Slept several hours, woke up thinking that I was fine because I was not going to drink and drive or any of that. I woke up feeling like I was fine, but clearly I was not. I had only slept 3 or 4 hours. So and I had drunk too much. So I got in the car to drive down to Saginaw to see my girlfriend and my family, and I got speeding. Because I still speed. That's a problem.
Right.
That hasn't changed.
As you do. Yeah.
That hasn't changed. But and so I'm speeding, get pulled over, and they, but I felt like I was okay, but breathalyzed over the limit, right. Go to jail. So I call this and I'm trying to figure out and call the sleep study specialist guy. And whatever. And he's like, Jeremiah, this is not sleep related. This is the addiction talking, not. And I was like, oh, I wish I knew who that sleep study, because I want to call and thank him, because my family had been telling me about going to rehab and things like that. And they knew that there was a problem. They knew I had to borrow so much money, and someone that talk about codependency in families. And, I was struggling to pay a super cheap rent on a decent salary because all my money was going to right. buying. So I was like, oh, and that was the catalyst for me, this, getting pulled over with that. And I had been pushing it off too. I recognized that I had this problem. And so I kept saying, okay, when there's a break in my work, my work's so busy right now, I can't take 2 weeks off to let me wait until this. And I kept pushing until this happened. So it was and that was the kick in the butt for me. I was like, okay, well, and then not get pulling over, and then a sleep study specialist saying, This is the addiction talking. And I was like, yep, you're right. And so I went into inpatient rehab for 2 weeks over Christmas. I went in, like I said, December 17th. I missed Christmas of 2017 with my family. But you know what? It's the best thing ever. My family too was like, we're so happy that you did it. I remember my grandma too. My grandma struggled with Ambien things too. And she's like, it's the best thing you ever did. And she stopped taking Ambien after that too, because she had her own issues too. And which I was thankful for. And so after that, I went to outpatient and things like that. And I did it for probably a year and a half. And I was lucky that I was, I didn't have multiple trips. And I'm lucky that I had one DUI to be that's all that happened to me. Like, and saying all that happened to me, right? That's terrible. Like, it's like, it could have ruined my career. It could have but I'm lucky that that's all it was. And I'm lucky that I didn't end up hurting myself or somebody else. I'm lucky that I kept my job throughout it. And they were allowed me to take FMLA and go in for a couple of weeks. And I started to right from there. I started to become myself again. I recognized myself again. I didn't recognize myself. I was not who I am. I am ambitious. I'm hardworking. I'm curious. I try all these things, and I wasn't any of those because my mind was completely around. If I don't get some more Ambien, I'm not going to sleep tonight, and I'm not going to be able to do my job. I'm not going to be able to function. I'm not going to be able to support my students who rely on me. So I need to be able to do this. So I had all these excuses and to me, again, it kept being this idea of it was sleep oriented until a catalyst was like that, getting pulled over, and then a sleep study specialist being like, and my family was telling me, but I wasn't receptive because it was like, no, these are just sleep related. It wasn't. I mean, it was, and I still like I said, still have sleep issues, but I have different ways of coping now and doing things which are healthy. Yeah, it's still a thing. And when I say day to day, I don't follow 12 steps. I don't think that's not necessarily my path. Everybody's path is different. But it's something that it weighs heavily on me every day still. And I don't think it's necessarily, I don't have cravings. I don't have these things anymore. It's more like for me, the day to day is the stigma. I don't sometimes feel like I'm good enough to have this, I have these things like this, been lucky enough to do it. I have to remind myself that it's okay to have struggled through this and it's a dark part of my history and that and one of the biggest things for me too is being really, you lose memory. So I've lost so many memories. I hate it. I look at pictures and I'm like, I don't remember doing this. I don't remember or things that I do. It's hazy, right? Things become hazy, and I hate that. There was this period where I don't fully remember, and my girlfriend has to remind me we had great memories and things. And I don't during that dark period. All I remember are the dark things, and that hurts because I know that there was good things there, but everything was so hazy, and I don't remember those things, and I don't remember helping people like I did, and because all I can think of the selfish part of me that was thinking about the addiction, and I have to be reminded by coworkers, my girlfriend, my family that I did support people. I did care. And but I don't remember those things about myself during that time. I know them about myself now, but during that time, it's hard for me to remember the positive things I did. And that's really hurtful and hard.
I think that speaks to the stigma. There's a lot of shame and guilt attached to that. And you just talking about people having to remind you of all the good things. I think society's created this picture of what someone with a substance use disorder should look like or behave like or what kind of person they are. And you can be a great person and still struggle with substance use disorder. You can still help people. Julie was a nurse. She was helping people during it as well. It's not this idea that everyone has. And so I'm just, again, so glad we're having this conversation because you all are so successful. You go against the picture that society has painted. And Lori, I want to give you a chance to kind of talk about your family and friends and community during this time, because you said you didn't really want to share. There was that stigma. When you did share, did you feel supported by the community, by those people in your circles?
I felt honestly a little bit more supported by people outside because they understood it. And so it was kind of my role then to try to also help educate people about what we went through. So I isolated because one, I didn't know what to do with all of my feelings about that, all of those negative feelings. And I didn't know how to tell people. I thought I was a really bad mom. I did. I'm not a bad mom. I'm an awesome mom. I was a room mom, the popcorn mom, the head of the PTA. I drove my daughter to school every day. We went to Jonas Brothers concerts. We had cookie decorating parties. She had a great life. And so sometimes when people think, they start using to have, cover trauma, maybe But it can also be I couldn't sleep and I took a pill, or I was going through a difficult time and just like you had the cliff dive into it. You know, Julie cliff dived. You kind of
Slow
the
thing.
zero entry pool. You like pew, cliff dived in. And so for us, it was a cliff dive when we found out she was struggling with heroin, but it really wasn't. We had noticed when she was, like I said, about 15, she started struggling. We did take her to her doctor, and she wasn't being honest with what was happening because she thought she could quit. She thought she was strong enough. She thought she was smart enough, and she thought she was in control of it. So she expressed anxiety and depression, and that's what they were treating her for. But that wasn't the primary issue. So for me, I just was so afraid. And, I have supportive friends and family, and some of them have expressed that they are disappointed that I didn't say anything. And then that just adds to it because I'm sorry that I didn't behave the way that you wanted me to behave. I was just trying to survive, man.
Right.
I was just trying to survive, doing the best that I can. So sometimes that's hard to hear. And I understand that it comes from a place of love and support. But once we're through it, and once I've now poured my heart out and told you what's happening, for you to judge me how I told you and when I told you is really hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if you have somebody who comes to you and says, I'm struggling, don't tell them, why didn't you tell me sooner? It's not helpful. I wasn't able to. It's not anything against you that I didn't trust you or I don't love you or I don't value you and I thought you'd be mean to me. That is not it at all. I couldn't say it. Mm-hmm. And so the stigma kept us quiet for a very long time until I literally now I have a 44-page Word document filled with links of articles I've read and videos I've watched and stacks of books that I had to help educate myself on why my daughter couldn't just stop doing it. Because our first conversation for 2 years, stop doing that. You're ruining your life. You're ruining our lives. Just knock it off. Mm-hmm. And then as an educator, I was like, clearly there's something I don't know because she's not been able to stop. And so I thought, you better just shut up and now you need to get educated. And then, so of course I dived into how can I fix her? Because she's the one with the problem. And then it quickly became apparent, how do I fix me? One of the turning points for me is I was diagnosed with breast cancer in March of 2017. Is that right? No, 2016? I don't remember. I'm 4.5 years in recovery. I just had a clean mammogram last week. So it's 4.5 years ago. And up until then, I really was obsessively, compulsively trying to save her. She was then a year in recovery, which she had hit a year twice before that. And hitting that year mark, getting from year 1 to year 2 is there's a lot of brain stuff that happens. And I started to see her come back. I remember telling her at one point, Jeremiah, I don't even know who you are. I don't know who you are. It changed her personality so much. But after she was well for a year, that third time, I was like, I really need to take care of myself. So I made all my doctor's appointments that I had neglected to make, including a mammogram, which I hadn't had in 6 years. Okay. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was like, the first thing I did is I Googled, does stress give you breast cancer? Because I was like, great. I raised a heroin addict. Now I gave myself breast cancer. How do I suck so bad?
Oh my goodness.
I'm the most horrible person. Google says no, stress doesn't give you breast cancer, but I am here to tell you I know it contributed to it because I was living at such a high level of stress and not sleeping and not caring for myself for 4 years. I know it contributed to it. We have no history of it whatsoever. But that was a real turning point for me where it helped me realize that I also don't get a do-over. This is my one chance here on this earth. And if I spend my time obsessively, compulsively worrying about her, which is not helping her, it's only hurting me, I need to do something differently. And so my friend that we spoke out on campus, her husband worked undercover narcotics in Flint. She has 2 little kids and a full-time job. And I thought, what is her secret? How does she sleep at night? How do you not worry? And then I thought about everybody else who puts themselves in harm's way. How does a family member of someone who's in the military and active duty sleep at night? How does somebody who's their loved one is an astronaut? How do you sleep at night knowing your person is freaking not even on this planet? Right. How do you sleep? And I thought those people know something that I don't know. They have learned that worry is unproductive and hurtful. And I started practicing not worrying. For the first time, it was 5 minutes. I set my alarm and I would not worry for 5 minutes. And it was hard. Absolutely. I stopped worrying for 5 minutes and then I gradually got up to 10 minutes. And when I would have pictures of what she would look like laying in a casket and what outfit she'd want to wear and what flowers she'd want to have at her funeral, I would say out loud to myself, you are not going to think that. Mm-hmm. That is not the vision you're going to have for your daughter. And I would close my eyes and I'd imagine her standing at the altar getting married. I imagine future grandchildren. I imagine her graduating from college. I imagine her happy and healthy. I will not imagine my daughter dead. And once I took control of my thoughts, because you can control your thoughts. You can say, no, we're not thinking that. It's exhausting. But once I took control of my thoughts and I stopped worrying and saw the unproductiveness of that and the harmfulness it was to me, the third time she was out actively using, I slept like a baby. Slept like a baby. Because there's nothing I could do about it. I had done everything I could. I pray about it. I have strong faith, and I think prayers definitely help. But there was nothing I could do to stop her from using drugs. And so I just had to focus on being healthy myself.
I wanted to, before we jump to Julie, I wanted to chime on one thing that you said that really resonated. Like, I had my mom especially be like, she's like, how are you so damn smart, but you're making such stupid decisions? And it's like, it's like this
thing to say.
Right. But like, it's like this, like it was like a conscious decision I was making, you know, it was, and it wasn't, it was the addiction taking hold. And I felt no other solution. It's like, I gotta sleep. That was my thought process at the time. Right. And it was just like, because if I don't, I'm going to be miserable and all like, and when I was really miserable about is this, you know, it was not having Ambien. I was like, I didn't sleep. But realizing now it's like, if I don't sleep, I'm going to feel like crap the next day, but it's not going to end the world. I still do some nights. I'm like, well, I didn't sleep. That sucks. Next day is going to suck. But next night I'm going to sleep well, you know, it's just, I remember my mom just asking like, how are you making just stop making those stupid decisions.
Said that over and over.
And it's like,
what are you doing?
Right. And it was like, and it's just, and for families like, and I feel so guilty for my girl, for my mom and my dad and everybody else to worry them. And still, it's just like, it wasn't the decisions. It was just, wasn't myself.
Yeah.
And I feel so guilty still for putting my family through that. Like, and because I know I hear you saying this worry and the stress and anxiety and all these thoughts, and I know my family is thinking the same things. And I'm just thankful that I don't have to worry them that way. I mean, I'm sure I'm worrying them in other things I'm doing, right? I know I'm going to skydiving or I'm going like, you know, like, and they're like, oh God, okay, what are you? But like, you know, I am thankful that I part of the reason I do push and then like ever want to go back there because I never want to worry my family again like that.
Yeah.
Not only for myself, but for my loved ones. And I just, when you said that, I was like, I just remember hearing that. How can you be so damn smart and make such stupid ass decisions?
I said those exact same words.
I apologize, Julie.
No, that was good. And Julie, I just want you to kind of reflect on the same question, but you said you went to recovery a few times, like inpatient and in recovery housing and things like that. Did stigma play a role in your decisions on any of that, or when you're gonna do it? You said I'm a nurse, I can figure it out myself. Did stigma play a role in that, or
a huge role, because the nursing side of me was very guilty of a patient comes in through the ER, hands you a medication list. I look at that list and I say, you're drug seeking. We did. We all did it. And I just, you know, that's the way it was. So yeah, absolutely. And, you know, with HIPAA and confidentiality, I had a very hard time even going to support groups. I'm a pretty conservative private person. And I know that nothing is confidential, truly. I mean, it's supposed to be, but things get out there.
And you're in a small town.
Very small town. So I know what it's like. I know both sides. And so, yeah, it kept me from meetings. It kept me from support groups. I didn't want to run into somebody, you know, that I worked with or, you know, a family member, a friend of a friend. I knew everybody. So it was very difficult. In fact, I often, I don't know if all of you have ever seen the show Mom on CBS where the mom is a drug. Have you seen it?
I've seen a couple of episodes.
Anyway, I remember the first time I saw that, I thought, wow, I wish the show could have been on when I was struggling because it brings humor to it, you know? And there was no humor at all when it was me. You know, there was no, my family was supportive, but my family wanted to, and when I say I'm going to tell you my siblings were very supportive, but weren't ready to be educated. And they wanted to send me away, get me fixed and bring me back. And they didn't get it. Now my husband and my two children were fortunate enough when I was in Brighton, they offered a lot of classes for family members. So we all took classes. We learned about the disease and we all did counseling. So yeah, there's just a ton of stigma, the language, the drug seeking, addict, junkie, all that. It was terrible, and I'm really, one of my big goals is to change that. Hopefully, end it, but at least make it better.
I'm curious. So you said patients would come in and you'd have stigma or an idea what kind of person they were during the time that you were also using substances. Did you see yourself in that, or did you view yourself differently than those people?
I don't. So my substance use started. It was so quick. Like I remember doing that prior to my substance use. I could tell by your and everybody did it. I don't remember doing it when I was in active illness, and I think maybe I kind of distanced myself from that, so I didn't have to think about that because I was the supervisor and I could go where I wanted. If I didn't want to be in ER, I didn't have to be in ER.
Okay.
So I kind of shied away. It was too hard to face at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of TV shows, I one thing that's hard, I don't know, have you seen this show Why Women Kill?
No.
Okay.
Now I have 2 shows I
My
have to
husband
watch.
doesn't allow me to watch that.
It's incredible. It's incredible. But so it's about there's 3 there's one in a 2000, now modern, there's one in the 1980s and 1950s, and you see 3 simultaneous stories about relationships, and eventually the woman kills somebody, and it's why? But I had to stop watching it because there's 3 stories, and it's just hilarious, but awkward and the cringy show at times. But the modern day one was about the guy. He is addicted, and so they bring in this. It's drama based, and so they bring this couple that open relationship, and they bring in another girl, so it's an open three-way relationship now. And the other girl's like, "Oh, you're a writer. You need Adderall to keep going." And so then it shows his story of getting back into addiction and relapsing, and it was hard. I was like, I gotta stop. It was my girlfriend and I were watching. I was like, I can't watch this anymore.
Yeah.
So we started initially just seeing okay, we're going to fast forward through that section. And we'll watch the other 2, the 50s and 80s ones. And we still did it for a while. Eventually we kept starting it anyway. I was like, okay, I got to stop. So that
it's not healthy.
It's triggering, right?
Yeah.
It's
not
hard
healthy.
because I'm I can't watch this right now. I can't.
Yeah.
And even though I'm years out from ever using Ambien or pills or anything. And it's still brings back this thoughts about that was me, Look at him conniving.
Yeah.
Look at him thinking he's okay. And I was just can't do it. It's too hard to see that and reminisce and think about where I was and what I did. And, but yeah, it's, those type of things can be hard. And,
There have been a lot of movies that have come out, which is great because it brings a lot of awareness. And being an advocate in the public, a lot of times people say, "Oh, did you see this one? Did you see that one?" I've seen none of them. None of them. Why would I want to put myself through that emotional journey? I've already been there.
Same.
I have a movie right up here in my head. I don't need to see somebody else's tragic story. That would not be helpful in my continued recovery. And I appreciate it. I'm so thankful that they're bringing some awareness to it. I hear that they're really well done, but I just never foresee myself watching any of those movies. I just don't.
Even Queen's Gambit, I was oh, she's
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
I've seen that one. That's a great
That's
one.
a really
That's
great
really
one,
good
but
too.
why did it have to have that part? You know,
Well, I mean,
I'm
it did normalize it though. And I was okay
Yeah.
with that one because, but at the same time, other ones, sometimes it's hard.
Yeah,
And
it's too much.
It becomes too much.
Yeah.
And so it brings me back to a time that of myself that I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
I think that leads me into a great question that I had for you all. And that's just, what does life look like now after? How have things changed? So you're talking about how now some of those movies aren't appropriate for you. You can't do it. What does life look like? Where are you emotionally, personally, spiritually, before, during, now? What does that look like now? How are things changed?
I would say, I'll start us off. I will say that I went for a long time to, I went to Brighton as well for my,
As did my daughter.
2017.
Yeah.
It's
Great
great.
program.
And then I went to outpatient where I had therapy, and that was so helpful. And I kind of got away from going to, and they kind of discharged me. And I'm still fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I'm 100, I'm great, but I still feel like I'm actually going to try to start seeing therapy again, just to talk to somebody about it, because there's, it's that stigma, and that for me, it's not the cravings or just things that this worry that I'm going to go back into it. I mean, everybody's different, right? But for me personally, that's not my concern. My problems I deal with now are the shame and the guilt and the again, like I said, my what I put my parents through, what I put my girlfriend through, what I put my family through, what I put my work through, and how I wasn't as supportive for other people. And because that's what I love to do. I am all about helping other people. That's even during the depths of my addiction, that was still like who I was, and it's who I am, is helping others. And I know that I didn't help enough people the way I could have. And so that's part of the reason I'm sharing this story, that I want to help other people, like say, hey, it's normalize it. And this is how you can get help and why it's so beneficial. But like, for me, I need to be able to talk it through and say, these are just the issues for me, is that shame and guilt and the stigma and not being able to watch certain shows because it brings back these dark times for me. And that's what I go through. It's like, life looks great for me now. I'm so successful. I'm so happy. I'm like, travel. I do like all these things that I, used to do. And like, I still did, I would say, but I didn't embrace. I didn't fully find value in. I didn't find value in life. I wasn't enjoying it to the fullest extent. And I do now. I'm happy. I'm healthy. I'm successful. I care about other people. But like, that inner work, I think for me, is where it's at. It's like that emotional toll of like, I did this part. There was like, and I hurt people because I brought them, like, I made them so afraid for me. And that, but not only that, just like the sense of like that I wasn't myself. And that's really hard. And that's something that I'm struggling with now. And it's not anything like overt. It's just like in there, and it's still hard for me. And it's something I'm still working through. And I think I'll always still be working through. And so, yeah, I think that like, I really need to like talk to people more about it and be more open about it. And why it's part of the reason why I'm here today, is just like being more communicative about it. And it's that shame and guilt that still resonates with me. But the addiction itself, I know that's not going to be. The addiction for me is other shifted. Like now it's this damn phone and playing, playing games on it and stuff like that, and spending money on it, those type of things. It's like, 'cause it shifts. Like, it's like that, because I mean, it is that it is an illness, and it's things like I've shifted to other things, which are healthier, but it's still, girlfriend and I talk about like me having like too much like on my phone or games or other things. Like I've shifted it, but I still have to be able to work through those things. So, but those are more manageable, and I'm more cognizant of those things. But for me, the after effects are the, almost 4 years gone, like being like still that shame and guilt are there, and working through that is the hard part for me.
It's definitely a journey, not a destination. So having people in your corner supporting you, doing stuff like that. And so, Julie, did you resonate with that story at all?
A lot. The one thing that Jeremiah said that is so me is I'm a caretaker. I'm a people pleaser. I never tell anybody no. I help everybody. And at the time I could not see it, but looking back, I had, at that point in my life, I had so much going on. My mother's illness, work, children. I had a brother who was going through a divorce, who was kind of relying heavily on me for therapy, I guess. The guilt and the shame for me was terrible, but the more I talk about it, the more I learn, the more I help other people, the less that it goes away. It gets better. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, I'm going to be a drug addict. I don't think that's anybody's intention ever. I know I worried a lot of people, myself as well. My biggest worry was, my mom died thinking I was in recovery, but I wasn't in recovery, So there's always going to be regrets, and there's always going to be that looking back. But the biggest thing for me was finding purpose in my life again. I felt after I lost my job, I had no purpose. And if I can't be productive, and if I can't help other people, who am I, or what am I? So getting into Peer 360 was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it helped me in just, not just one way, not just in a job, but doing the support groups and events and talking to people and hearing other people's stories. It's just amazing to me. And, it's like, when you talk about, you're afraid in the beginning, you're afraid to talk about it. And I was like that too for a very long time. Now it's like, that's all we talk about, it's not a big deal. And it's, so it's helped a lot. And guilt and shame are tough. They're tough to deal with, but I think I've finally gotten past that. And therefore I feel so much more productive and more able to help others who are struggling.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're able to work through your own
Yes.
stuff as you're helping other people work through it and learning
Yes.
along the way and developing that great
I'm
sense of
not alone,
community.
because
Yeah.
I felt so alone.
Yeah.
For years.
Yeah.
You know, I felt totally alone. There was nobody like me in my town. You know, I didn't think there was anybody, you know, like me in my town, and everybody's talking about me, and people didn't understand. And so it was very lonely, very isolating, as you said. But yes, moving forward, being productive and being able to help others.
Lori, I want to give you a chance to touch on this too. How does life look different for you all right now?
So the beautiful thing about this journey is that my life is richer than it ever could have possibly been without this journey. So even though you guys feel bad about what you put your parents through and your loved ones through, there's a lot of good that can come from that. Some good that came for me personally when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. That was an easy journey for me because I had already been through a very difficult journey. Had I not gone through that experience and learned some emotional strength with my daughter's illness, I would have been devastated by that. And I don't know that it would have ended as well. It made me so much stronger emotionally, knowing that much of our life is not in our control. We like to think that it is, but it isn't. None of us are guaranteed we're getting home after this. I pray we all are, but we're just not. And so it helped me kind of relinquish control, trying to control things that weren't in my control, which I don't know about you guys, but that's always been a part of me. Because I think a lot of successful people are, you have a plan and you do this, and I'm going to graduate college and then I'm going to go here, and you have all these goals and you know, that looks like success. But if you aren't emotionally able to handle when the tough things come, it helped prepare me. The other thing it did is the complete opposite of what I thought. I thought it would shrink my circle and nobody would like me anymore, and that people would ostracize me, and I'd lose my reputation at work and my friends and my daughter's friends and their parents. And it did the opposite. My friend group has expanded to the most wonderful people along this most difficult journey, to include leadership within all 3 counties. You know, I can text judges and sheriffs and police chiefs, and they will listen to me. I have widened it to the people who are homeless, who are living in hotels, who don't have food, who don't have the support that we did. So all of us have had the experience of going to Brighton. That says one thing to me: we all have private insurance. With our Hope Not Handcuffs program, I have learned that there are a lot of people who don't have the same level of support that we have. And I have an opportunity to serve and an opportunity to help people who literally have nothing. We helped a girl, she literally didn't even have shoes. And there's an opportunity to, you know, I kind of cringe anytime says, oh, thoughts and prayers. They don't need thoughts and prayers. They need some ramen noodles.
Right.
They need a pair of shoes, and they need transportation up to treatment. And they need somebody to let them know that they're not a scumbag, that they are a good person with a really bad disease, and they are not the disease. I've done a lot of work personally with guilt and shame. I think guilt, you really have to recognize, is it guilt or false guilt? Did you intentionally try to hurt somebody? Then you should feel some guilt about that. But here's the thing, you can fix it. You can apologize, and you can say, you know what? I rethought that. When I said this or I did that, I feel very guilty about that. That was wrong. And I apologize. And I hope that you accept my apology. And whether they do or not, that's on them if they want to live in forgiveness or unforgiveness. But you can make amends for things that you feel guilty of. Shame has no value in anybody's life. It has no positive value. I do not feel ashamed of my daughter. I do not feel ashamed of my journey. I do not feel ashamed of times when I didn't do it perfect. Because I will tell you what, sincerity and transparency trump perfect every single time. People just want to know you're real and you're imperfect, just like them. Just like them. None of us are perfect. And how dare us hold anybody, even hold ourselves to a standard that is, we don't hold anybody else to the same standard we hold ourselves to. We don't, not. Right? So I have learned to have a lot of grace, not only with other people, but the hardest part is having grace for myself. When I don't do it right, when I upset somebody that I love, when I could have done more, when I should have done less, it's okay. It's okay. And to have a community of people now in my life that get it and I can be in a room with people and I don't have to be like, oh God. I remember when I first started speaking, I was invited to the Midland Country Club to do a presentation. And as I looked around those rooms, I recognized some people, former coworkers, people I look up to and admire. And I was like, I have made a horrible decision. How am I possibly going to share my daughter's story? And then Angela Heine from Midland gets up and does my introduction and tells about her experience that she had with somebody that impacted her life with substance use. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, you just made that so much easier. We make it easier for each other by talking about it. We make it easier for the other person who can't yet talk about it. And people will be ready when they're ready. But there's no use for shame in my life. I've not lived a perfect life. I've made amends for things that I can make amends of. But shame is just going to keep me sick and in the past.
Absolutely.
And you can't live in the rearview mirror. You gotta live for right now. That's all we got. It's right now. Not even 6:00 for dinner. Although I should probably have something prepared, and I don't. But it's been a wonderful learning process that has made my life overall much richer, made me a better person, made me a better mom, strengthened my relationship with my daughter, and I'm to the point where I will be okay, whether she's okay or not. I always say I'll stay in the amusement park with her, but I'm not getting on the roller coaster. Because it doesn't help her. Yeah, but I will stay there. She's off the ride. I will encourage her to get off the ride, but I'm not going to ride that roller coaster with her anymore. It doesn't benefit me. It doesn't help her. So to get to this point, and honestly to the point where when she was out the last time, I had so much peace because I realized that so much is not in our control. And that if the worst possible thing that could happen, and from a parent standpoint, the worst possible thing that could happen is your loved one dies. I had peace that if she died, that God was removing her from the most horrible circumstances that she could possibly be in for the rest of her life. And I was grateful for that. And to have a parent get to the point where they would be more at peace with their child dying than watching them prostitute themselves, live homeless on the streets, be sick. I had peace that if that was the outcome, that was the best outcome possible. Thankfully, just for today, we did not experience that. But I got to a level that is my peace, that's not in my control, and that everything that happens, no matter what the outcome, it's going to be okay.
One thing that you mentioned about living in the present, and that's like not dwelling on the past. Yeah, it's hard not to dwell on the past. I still am so guilty of that myself. But one thing I share in recovery circles, like I said, I lived in Japan for a long time, and I'm one of my favorite concepts is this Japanese concept of ichigo ichie, which means like there's no real easy translation. Like it's a super short phrase in Japanese, but it's like we only have this moment within the five of us in a room together. We're only going to have this opportunity right now at this time. Like this same instance is never going to happen again. So we should embrace it. We should cherish it. We should acknowledge it and live it to the fullest. And I share this in recovery a lot. So because it helps me like saying this and sharing it because it like puts into perspective because me living in the moment and is, looking at my phone and not paying attention to what's really going on. I'm guilty so much of that, but at the same time, trying to reinforce that, we're only in this together. The five of us in this room only once. So we need to cherish. And this one, really one moment, one opportunity kind of is, I guess, the shortest way I can describe it. So this opportunity for us to be together is only here once. So we need to be able to embrace it, recognize that we have had these maybe shared experiences together, shared hardships, and then moving forward with it and acknowledging this moment is special and we need to cherish it. And then, so I share that with like recovery circles too. It's like, okay, we are necessarily like, if it's a meeting or if it's a conference, whatever it is, if we're able to like acknowledge that and embrace it and live it, truly live it, it makes that special and it makes not dwelling on that guilt much easier. It makes dwelling on what happened in the past or what we did easier. And it makes me at least feel more optimistic and more cognizant of how lucky I am to have gone through that and grown from it and be a better person from it. So and it's about living that moment. So because it's like this, Buddhist concept of every moment is fleeting, right? Impermanence, like this, everything's fleeting. So we should embrace it because life is impermanent. Every moment we have, every breath we take is impermanent. So let's cherish those and recognize and not put ourselves in situations where we are not truly cherishing each moment we have.
Mhm.
And in substance abuse, it doesn't allow us to do that.
Mhm.
And that's one of the big reasons that I know I'm not going to fall in that trap again, because I want to really embrace those moments. And it's something that I can't do if I'm using. So,
Even the tough ones.
yeah, even the tough ones.
Even
Absolutely.
the tough ones. Yep.
Absolutely.
Which
So-
nobody wants to, but
But those are
you
moments
can
that are
lean
ours.
into that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we know that those moments too, those hard moments are impermanent too.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a loved one going through it, you know that if you can guide them and help them, support them, and get them in the right decision, that moment of difficulty too will pass. The moments of good times pass quickly too. So we got to cherish those. But moments of difficulties too, they're going to pass quickly. Life is short, so let's really embrace those. And that's why I shared it a lot in recovery circles, because it's like, okay, that was a crappy part of my life. I've passed it. I've moved forward. I'm going to embrace what is in the now.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's actually a great place to pause. I want to really dig deeper into the stigma and how the community and individuals can better support people and make this journey a little bit easier, or just not as alone and isolated. So we'll be continuing this conversation on the Directions Not Included podcast. You'll be able to find the link to that episode in the description below the podcast, or searching for any major podcast platform. So thank you all for sharing your stories, and I look forward to continuing the conversation on that podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
You can stay connected with the Visibility Project by subscribing, liking, and sharing on your favorite podcasting and social apps. Look for us at the Visibility PRJ.
Financial support is needed to keep the conversation going. Go to midlandfoundation.org/give and select the Cultural Awareness Coalition Endowment Fund to be part of the project. Note podcast in your donation notes.
Thank you for listening.
We see you.
We hear you.
And together, we are making a difference.